Janet Mitchell because she wrote it. So that's a good idea. Janet, would you come up, please? I want to read something to you because I think when we were talking the other day, that it rings true for a lot of playwrights, but this is what I wrote. Every word I write is like a drop in my blood. It has flowed passionately and long, and I need time to recover from the emotions spent before I begin a new story. My characters are aspects of my life. I have to be careful and respectful, moving between them. Now, in writing this piece, I got the feeling that some of it was autobiographical. But I want you to tell me if that's true, how much of it's true, and why this particular play and why now?
Well, in terms of the play being autobiographical, parts of it is, because Diane, the woman in the play, the mother, is a composite of so many women that I know. She's a mother, she's a wife, girlfriend, she has children, she works, she has some struggles in life. So she's all of, I would say she's a combination of maybe 90% of my friends. And as for the play in its entirety, there are very personal moments in it that I thought was very important. And you heard that in the first scene as Joan, the grandmother, talks about her family in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and how her parents couldn't read or write, but they believed in education. And they pulled their little money together, what little money they had, to see that their daughter went to college. And that is the story of so many of our ancestors that is never told. And that's why that is so important to me, because a lot of times our young people really don't make the connection that we are where we are today because of the sacrifices that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents made and endured in this country.
You mentioned Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and you mentioned Tougaloo College and Morehouse, which is my brother is he's an old alma mater, my late brother. What are you were not born there, you were born in Harlem, is that correct?
Yes, I'm from New York City.
But your parents and your grandparents are from Mississippi, is that correct?
Well, my mother is actually from Mississippi. She's from Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and the town she lived in is called Crystal Springs, and the economy was picking tomatoes. So a couple of summers ago, I went to visit my cousin, and she told me this story about the picking of the tomatoes. So that, stayed in the back of my mind as I started to write this piece. And, it's amazing how time flies, because I actually started writing Second Look in June of 2014. And for 2 years, when I would come home from work, that was my thing. I would come home, go to my office, and just write.
So, did your parents or your grandparents come over with the Great Migration from like the early 1900s through the early to the late 50s? That first migration that came over from the South to California to New York, were they among those people? Was it your grandparents who came, or was it your parents?
It was actually my parents. My mother worked in, she worked in New Orleans. Her uncle owned a cleaners. And it's such an amazing story. This man was blind, and he owned his own business and was able to count his own money. So my mother moved to New Orleans to work with her uncle, and that's where she met my dad.
So,
and they moved to New York City.
And then they moved to New York City. Now, your major was not theater necessarily. Your major was English. Why did you become involved in theater? Not that it's that far apart, because as spoken word is a spoken word. And so I want to know how you made the connection between being an English major and all of a sudden your interest, or not all of a sudden, but your gradual metamorphosis over into playwriting, into theater.
Well, actually, I started in theater much earlier before going to college. There was this newspaper, you know, the Amsterdam, and I was about 14 years old, and they used to cover the different theaters because back in the early 70s, there were a lot of African-American theaters. You know, there were at least maybe 10 of them. So I used to always read the paper, and I saw this article and the pictures about the little theater at the Harlem YMCA, and they were doing Black Girl. And also at that time, a teenage magazine called Right On was, you know, very popular. And if I ever get to meet Melba Moore, I have to tell her this. And I remember she had this quote about, you know, why stay home and dream about being a star? Go out and do it. So I marched down to the Harlem YMCA, the little theater, and Franklin Thomas was the director. And so I said, do you have a part for me? And he said, no. He said, do you want to be the prop person? I said, well, what's that? And he says, well, this is what you have to do. And I was awful, but I kept going back. And I finally landed my first part, which was at Anna LaCasta. I played Katie. And from there, I was hooked. I was always in the theater, but I wanted to do something else when I went to college.
So did you pursue acting in college as well, or you just kind of put that on the shelf and just?
No, I've always been involved in the theater. Acting was okay, you know, and I would do it from time to time, but I was always interested in the playwrights. And back then, at that time, when you worked at a particular theater, you were part of the company. And so part of the company was the director, and they had the actual playwrights there. And so there was a playwright named Gertrude Greenwich, and she took me on as her mentee. And so I was always attracted to playwriting, directing, and the business end, producing. Even as a teenager, I was interested in producing, and I knew that's where I wanted to be.
If you had one single event that you say that you would say spurred you on or inspired you to write this piece, and I want you to explain the second book to me. What was that single event? Did something happen to you? Did someone say something to you? Did you see something? Are you? What is it? A story that you think has not been told and you feel compelled to tell it? Tell us an example of why you wrote this, or how you came to write it.
It's, you know, the thing about second book is actually I started writing this version of second book in 2014, but I had been tinkling with it, but with much older people who were in their 70s, who had retired. And when I went back to it, the characters somehow got younger. But I wanted to write a story that focused on single women who are raising their children alone. And I thought about all of my friends, because a lot of my friends' kids now are graduating from college. And so I often think about the struggles that they had, you know, finding childcare, trying to go to school, trying to be a good parent, trying to keep up with your kids. And I wanted to address them and to celebrate them, because Diane is a phenomenal woman. She's had a lot of struggles in life, a lot of setbacks, but she kept forging ahead. And that's what I wanted to show, the strength and perseverance of African American women.
You put a lot of emphasis on the grandmother and her emphasis rather on education. Was that one of your primary goals too? Were you trying to, because that's part of, I think, Black life that we don't really hear about a lot. And that's also something that was very stressful when I was growing up, because I'm from the South, and not just high school, but to go beyond that. Do you think that that had a great deal of influence as to the monologue that you gave your grandmother about education?
Absolutely.
And was your grandmother very much like that, or did she say things like that, or?
Well, it was mostly from my parents
Your
because my grandparents I didn't see often, you know, maybe once every 2 years. So I was extremely influenced by my parents, who I was very close to. And they really believed in education. And, you know, they believed that also that when you are privileged enough to get an education, that it is also your responsibility to give back.
What is your biggest aspiration for this play? I mean, you can do it over and over again, but what is your long-term wish and hope for this play? What do you want it to do? How you want it to make this journey that you're trying to accomplish?
Well, it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure.
In terms of what?
Well, in terms of just, you know, the funniest thing is I think writing it was the easiest part. Producing it is a whole other thing because you have to find the theater. You have to find the money to pay for the theater. You have to find the supporting people on your team. You got to find the right director. You got to find the right actors. You got to find the right scenic directors, the right costume people. So it's that type of a journey. But what I would like to see happen with Second Look is I'd like to find the time to sit down and to write the other characters. Because there are other characters, I don't want to give it away.
You need
There's
to
a lot of,
add more people to the.
well, to spin off another story about some of the people we talk about in the play. That are mentioned
as a separate
as characters.
story.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And it is to reach as many people as I can about it, to maybe one day even package it as a series, but because it serves so many purposes. It serves when Joan talks about her life in education and what it took for her to get ahead. I think young people need to hear that. And I think that African American women need to see, especially women who are struggling at some point, to see that this woman had all of these struggles and that in spite of them, she was able to overcome them. And I think that that's important to broaden the audience. And even people who don't look like us to know that that is in part of our history.
Yes. At one point, at some point as a playwright, and I know how difficult it is, when do you stop and say, okay, this is the piece, this is it right here? And when do you actually let other people read it or let other people give you suggestions and you take those and you assimilate it into it or you don't? When do you make the decision to say, okay, that's enough, this is written, this is what the story is?
Ooh, I don't think I've stopped that yet. I have a friend who teases me. She says, Janet, I hope you haven't been back in that play again. So.
Yeah, that's hard to do. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh yeah, I need to write that, I need to put that down there. And then you read it the next day and go, what was I thinking? This is awful. Have you ever had those experiences?
Well, the
Or you overhear
characters,
somebody like on the subway and you go, oh, I need to write that down, that sounds good. Do you ever do that?
the characters live in your head for a long time. They just left for a little while recently, but they stay in your head and you think about how they would approach things. You think about the continuity of the characters that you write about. And so they live on. The way I wrote Second Look is that it would take me about 2 weeks, 3 weeks to write one scene. And then I would take the scene up to my 90-year-old aunt and her boyfriend. Yes, her boyfriend. And I would read the scene. would go to visit them at Riverdale and bring another scene. And that's how it all came together.
So when you are doing these characters, for example, I know there's a sound inside your head that you're hearing in the delivery, and then you hand it over to an actor. Are you surprised when you hear nuances that you never heard before, never thought of? Are you pleasantly surprised? Are you disappointed? Are you very regimented in that you want them a specific way? Or how do you go about processing it when you hear somebody else reading your words?
The first reading we had, I think, was in maybe 2015. And I remember when I packaged the scripts and gave them out and found the people. And I said to a friend of mine, I said, geez, I hope they are not at home laughing. And so my friend says, no, I don't think so. And the first night that we had the first rehearsal for the reading, because once you finish it, the play, you start to have a series of readings. And I heard Kim Yancey read Diane, and it was like, wow, did I really write that? And that was the first really jolt that I had, that because I had only heard these characters in my voice, and to hear it in her voice, I knew I had Diane.
I'm going to read you a couple of questions, and I don't want you to think about it. I'm totally stealing this from James Lipton, who I consider one of the premier interviews when it comes to actors, but I'm going to read you something, and I want you to give me the first thing that pops into your head. What is your favorite quote?
Nothing beats a failure but a try. From my mother.
All right, a sound that you absolutely hate.
Whining.
Whining.
Yes.
How many times have you been in love?
Oh, not that many. Maybe 2, 3.
If you were stranded on a desert island, what are the essential foods and drinks that you must have?
Cran apple juice.
Really?
Yep. I know I should have water, right?
No, this is your island. You have cran apple juice.
Yep.
And what food?
Popcorn. No salt, though.
I love popcorn.
You sound like a barrel of laughs on an island. That's not my list at all. I say martinis and chocolate.
Sounds good.
When you see God, what is the first thing you'd like to ask?
When will I see my parents?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You miss them still to this very day?
Oh, yeah, sure.
How long ago, may I ask?
My mom passed away in 2014, and
When
the
you
company,
started this?
yeah,
Very interesting.
yeah, 2014. No, actually, I'm sorry, 2013.
Uh-huh.
And for those of you who don't know me, she was my best buddy. We went everywhere together. We did everything together. And she was one of my biggest supporters. Whatever I was doing, anything, no matter how big or how small, she was always there.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Nah,
What does that mean? Yes or no?
I don't think about it a lot.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Okay. What would you like your epitaph to read?
That I was kind, that I treated people in a respectful way, that I shared whatever knowledge that I had, and that I mentored people. And the most important thing for me is that I was a good person.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's really weird to think I'm going to interview her, but Kim Yancey Moore, ladies and gentlemen. Kim.
Yes.
Let me get the elephant out of the room first. If
Okay.
you'll notice, Kim bears a striking resemblance to Diane Sands. she's been hearing it all her life.
And you all know who that was.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And this character I find interesting is named
Diane. Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
I'm sorry, I don't know that.
no. Are you serious?
Oh my, well,
no.
that's a talk for after we're finished.
That is, yeah, we'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
Yeah, Google her, you'll be
Yes.
surprised.
Yes.
Now, what is it in this character when you were first reading it that attracted you to it? Because you have to be something, even if it's a terrible person, there's something in you that is drawn to it. What would you say that is?
Well, I have to say that what I was struck by this play is how close it is to my own personal life.
Okay.
It just so happens that in my own family, health challenges with my own husband
Mhm.
are eerily similar to what goes on in this play that we didn't even show today in these scenes. And so I always think as an actor, when pieces like that happen to you, it's for a reason, and you don't have to act, you just have to be. And so I find a lot of Diane, I just have to be. And that's, that's pretty good as an actor. You don't have to work so hard. I say.
Yeah, yeah.
So I find that, and never knew Janet before I ever started doing this. So it's also uncanny how she could write somebody that I could just be without her having to work with me for 10 years and say, like, write this. It just happened.
So the parts of the character that you don't have to reach for are what is also important to you and also propels the character. When you're reading for a role, what is the first thing that you look for when you're determining how can I fit this in to me as an actress? What is there? I mean, sometimes it's the clothes. It can be something as simple as the way she does words, a saying, or I mean, what is it about this character that's like you?
Well, it's when you're working on a piece and you're in rehearsal, you have to sometimes find who this woman is, who this person is. So for me, I'll just say, even if I was working on this piece, I would want to know, well, how does she move? How does she sit in a chair? How does she lay on a couch? How does she walk? I kind of go with it for those kind of physical things at first. Then I'm always interested in relationship to the other characters. And so I look for what's her relationship to this person, how is it different from that person, how is it different from this. So I kind of do all of that when I'm looking, when you say looking for how to play it, I'm looking for all of these things. And you don't find it right away. As an actor, it takes time. What I'm saying is good about it is I understand, for some reason, some of Diane just comes to me so easily that I don't have to take a whole lot of time to find it.
Yeah.
But you still have to go through that process.
I once met Leontine Price, the opera singer, and I was surprised to find out that she still went to her teacher after this international career, and she still studied her roles with him. I mean, she was still learning, and she said, I think she said you must sing on your interest when you're young so that you can sing on the rest of your savings when you're older. Otherwise, you're not going to have a voice. Are there still things that you're working on as an actress that you worked on? Kim went to the School of Performing Arts
High school.
with a lot, a roster of people you wouldn't believe. So are there still things that you are still doing internally as an actress to build on the characters that you do? Some basic 101 things that you still have to pay attention to?
I still have my speech 101 dialect and good speech diction book that I had all the way from high school. So I always go back to that, and I can still hear Mrs. Shine in the back of my head going, whatever what was that? Delilah the Darty was fat. Delilah the Darty was old. No doubt in the world about that, but Delilah the Darty had gold. And we used to have to do that every time we got up. And I still do it when I'm like rehearsing or warming up backstage. I still go to good old Delilah the Darty.
So, has it been an advantage looking like Diana Sands when you go into casting people who know who Diana Sands
Very
is?
much. Woo, yeah, when I started started out in this business, I was very, very fortunate that I got a chance to audition for what do you call it, the remaking, the revival of A Raisin in the Sun. And Harold Scott directed the piece, and Harold Scott had worked, or at least had been around the original Raisin in the Sun with Sidney Poitier and Ruby Dee and Diana Sands. So Hal was now directing this for theater up in Albany, Buffalo, Studio Arena.
Yeah.
And that's where he was doing it. And he and Diana Sands had been roommates. They weren't lovers, but they were roommates. You know, when people did that back in the day.
Yep, they did.
Okay. So the first day I walk in to rehearse, to the audition, and I'm wondering why the man is like not looking at me. And he's like, and his head is down, and you know, I'm thinking I'm giving a Lou Ferguson I was doing the audition with. I'm thinking I'm killing it. You know, I'm just happy because that was my dream. I had seen the movie as a kid. I always wanted to do this play, so I was like, I'm here and I'm giving it. But he just would not. He seemed so underwhelmed that I was like, what's that? I didn't think I got a call back, but sure enough, a week or so later, I got a call back. And he was a little bit better. He was more, you know, forthcoming and giving me direction and stuff. So after I got the part, Lou said to me, he said, you know, he just could not deal with you that first day you walked in there. He said, because I left the room and he put his head in his hands and he just said, she looks so much like Diana. I can't take it.
Yeah.
And they had a very interesting relationship. I think she was madly in love with Hal Scott. Hal was gay, loved her to death, but not as a couple. So however their relationship might have ended, I think that seeing me that day just brought it all back to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an advantage because I bet I got that job not because I could act, but but yeah, and so that became then for me, and I'm still trying to work on this piece because I'm still trying to do a one-woman show about Diana Sands. I'm not a writer, I'm an actor, so it's real hard writing this. But one of my points about it is that for a long time, I worried that people saw her and didn't see me when I walked into a room because they're sitting there reminiscing about who she was. They would literally, I had people come to me and they'd say, oh, you look so much like Diana. And then they'd start telling me stories and stuff, and I'm like, well, hello, I'm here. I'm here. Now, personally, I think she is still my favorite. I think she was brilliant.
She was.
So to be compared to her, I'll take it. I'll take it. But it was also for me for a long time, well, you know, what about my talent? I can do something, and I can act too. Don't you just think I do something a little bit different than her? But, and now I still love it. I still love being looking like her. So I've struggled with it, but it's all good. It's all good.
So you, I don't want to see, you took a hiatus for a while, you got married and had kids. Why did you think that was important, or that took precedence over your, because you know most actresses, they're like so self-absorbed, it's like, no, my career, my career. How did you make that decision, and how hard was that for you?
Very hard, but I wanted to be a hands-on mother. I did not want to have my children, I have two sons. I did not want them to, you know, give a kiss and mom's off to whatever theater, wherever. You know, that's the only place I'm a control freak, I guess, is that wanting to make sure I raised my children.
Sure.
Now, here's the other thing, which people don't really understand. Okay, I had my children, and then you try to go back to being an actor,
Yes.
and people are like, oh, it's
What
been
have
a
you
long
done?
time.
And like you died or something.
55 other actresses have come along, and
Yeah.
now, you know, and there is a hierarchy, and there is a term of, well, we owe this one this job, and we owe that one that job. I'm standing there trying to get a job, but it's not that they forget you, it's that, truthfully, other people come along, and you have to go back to trying to work from here and build, and you're trying to start over again. Now, if you having two children, sometimes you get tired. And you're like, well, you know what, I can't be doing this and be doing that. And I had to make my peace about, am I going to be a mom, or I'm going to be a freaked out actress trying to get a little job here and a little job there. So, yeah, I made the right choice. My youngest one just turned 18 last couple of weeks ago. He's going off to college, and truthfully, I'm working a whole lot more now since they got a little bit older. So it's worth it. They're wonderful young men, and I do not regret it. I might have cried a few tears when they were little, and I didn't get that job. No, definitely.
Do you find it more advantageous now, in 2019, to be, I don't want to say it, to be a black actress, to be an actress, period, a woman of color? Do you find it more difficult now than it was, or is that transition, is it any easier than it was for like women in the 40s and 50s and 60s, do you think?
I think that every era brings its own problems. I think that many things have changed and many things have not changed. You know, I still see many a script that still doesn't really understand who black women are, that we're one-dimensional. Very few pieces that show us in all of our beauty, our intellect. There's more opportunity for younger actors in film and TV. There is much more. But I think what happens is that they don't have the stage training, so that they lack there. And then there's but hey, film and TV pays you so much money. You go, oh, I don't need that job. I'll just stick with the film and the TV. So that's a great opportunity there. But is it better? Of course, things always get better. Things always do. But we still sometimes have those same
thing.
challenges.
Yes.
You know, how we are seen by the white media, how we are portrayed. It gets better, still things to work on.
There has been, and Imani and I talk about this a lot, we just talked about it not too long ago. There is a great deal of African and British Africans who've come to this country and are doing very well. What are your feelings about it? Do you kind of feel like it's a fad, and for some reason American blacks trained to do exactly that are sort of being pushed to the back because now this is the new thing? How do you feel about that?
Well, first I'm waiting for Britain to call and ask me to come over, and then I'll find that nothing is wrong with it at all. Just call me and ask me to come over there. I don't know. Our relationship with this lovely country we live in as black folks is real strange.
Yeah.
And so is it a fad? Perhaps. Perhaps it's, well, we'll give it to anybody but you.
Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
not saying it's just, and I don't fault the people, these actors who come over.
Oh, no. I mean,
Idris Elba can keep coming over. It's all right. I'm just saying they don't reciprocate as to what I understand. They're not asking the American actor to go over there, and our folks are just as talented.
Yes.
So, again, like you said, how do things get better and not? Some things we still got to work on. But it is a complicated relationship.
It is, very much so. I've been hearing from people like Samuel L. Jackson and other people who are, kind of like, what's going on here? I mean, we're still here, and they don't feel that they're being, like, it's almost like a backlash.
Yeah.
I think they kind of feel like that.
Yeah. I think the danger, though, is for we as the actors to make us seem as if we're attacking our fellow brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
Britain. That's the trap.
Absolutely.
Is we can't then start bad-mouthing them. They want us to do that. And then
Yeah.
no, we can't do that.
Very true, very true. And besides that would have to include Idris, and we can't. Not Idris, he's the exception. Oh, Idris and I are like this. I know he just got married. What are your, what do you want? Because I know sometimes dreams and things shift as we get older. And, I used to want to be rich, then I wanted to be tall. So what are your aspirations? What do you really want out of the business now?
Steady-
Ideally.
Ideally, steady work in across the board. So it's theater, film, TV, steady work. I no longer struggle with, am I good enough? Am I talented enough? I know I am.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get there, but I know that. So now I just would like steady work, like some other peers who may be of another persuasion,
Correct,
but steady work.
correct. Now I'm gonna ask you the same questions I asked
Oh,
Janet.
okay.
Pretend that I am James Lipton.
Ah!
What is your favorite quote?
When you asked her, I thought of this. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall rise up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint.
Love that. A sound that you absolutely hate.
Sirens, fire engines late at night that wake me up 2 and 3 in the morning.
A sound that you love.
The sound of my son's voices.
And they are gorgeous and tall. How many times, I know you're married, but how many times have you been in love?
A million.
I mean true love,
Oh,
not
true
crushes.
love, true love.
Including when you were a child, a little girl.
Okay. Ooh, okay, the little
Yeah.
girl too. Well,
Sure.
my dad was my first love, so.
Yeah.
So I would say all told, 4, 5 times.
Oh, okay. What is your, if you were on an island, what would you, your food and drink that you absolutely have to have?
I get 1 food.
One food and one drink, or I'll give you 3.
Oh, I get to have 3 foods.
2 foods and a drink. Let's not be greedy here.
Okay. Ooh, you know what? Vanessa recently introduced me to a ice cold vodka martini with a lemon peel. It's the best thing ever. That's what I want to have to drink.
Grown-up drinks, right?
Grown-up drink. So that's my drink.
I used to go out with this guy who told me, he said, if you have a drink, have a drink. Don't have a wine spritzer. You're insulting liquor when you do that. I was like, okay.
So it was true. So that's easy. Food, oh God, that's harder. I love a whole lot of stuff, but what would I need to? A peach from back when I was a child. I used to visit my grandmother in North Carolina. Those are the best peaches ever. I've never tasted one like it since, and what passes for fruit in New York now is like terrible.
Yeah.
So a peach, somehow they're gonna get me a peach from North Carolina that tastes like I remember. And unsalted potato chips.
Oh, yeah. That's a good
No salt, no
combination,
salt,
actually.
no salt.
Yeah. What part of North Carolina is your?
My parents were from Henderson.
Okay. When you see God, what is it the first thing you're going to ask?
Can I see mommy now?
Really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Mhm.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Mhm.
What do you think he'll come back as next? Based on your life that you've lived here, what do you think he'll be? All right, better question. What do you think you have been?
Oh, what have I been? I don't think I've been before. What would I come back as? I never thought about it. What would I come back as? Maybe an animal, some sort of animal.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, yeah.
And what would you like your epitaph to read?
I'm sad.
No,
No, I just mean to think about stuff like that. It's hard to read. Wow, I honestly can't say. I don't want to be known as. She tried to love as best she could.
I like that. That is Kim. Is there anything else you would like to say or?
Maybe open up the questions.
But you're finished with the questions. Now, this is the time you get to ask anything you want to either of Kim or Janet in terms of their careers or anything else. If you have some questions, please raise your hand. Yes. Love your hair, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to ask Ryan,
generally, when a playwright writes a play, they send it out to different companies, or they look for a producer. And I always knew from the beginning, being in the business, that not only did I want to write it, I wanted to have creative and financial control over the project. And even as a youngster, you know, because I produced my first project at 19, I went home, told my parents that I wanted to do a little film. And they said, really? So they got the camera and everything, and I called my friend Trudy, the playwright, and we did this little film. So I was always interested in the business aspect of arts. And I think that a lot of times young people sort of see the glamour and not really connect to this is a business. And so that's, you know, what I was always thinking, even as a young person. And out of all of the things in the arts, producing is still my favorite. It's challenging, it's hard, you know, and it's not easy for us, because I'm finding it, you know, running a theater company, it's very hard to get funding, you know, and you have to keep writing grants after grants after grants. And for some reason, we're not the favorite children. We, you know, we really have to struggle and keep all of your docs, and everything has to be right on time and right, or else you're not going to get anything. So it's a struggle, but it's a challenge that I like.
So you love a challenge, a real
Yeah.
big challenge.
Yes, yes.
I just want one more thing. I'm thinking when she was talking about producing. The most important thing you can do after the playwright and the casting is to get the right director. A bad director can wreck it for you, even without trying hard. And so I guess maybe what I want to know is, Imani, when you're looking at a script, what are you looking at? What are you looking for when you say, I'm going to do this project? What are you looking for? What? No, it's okay. Oh, yeah, right. What are you looking for? Really? What attracts you?
Well, usually it's an identification with it, it's something compelling about the script. Often it's also, I have a lot of great friends who are actors. And if I read a script and I hear Kim's voice, or I hear your voice, or I hear Rhonda's voice, or I hear Anita's voice, then that can also draw me to a project. A great script, of course, you're gonna be drawn to that, you know. What's a great script? I'm also very much a woman and a woman of color person. So I tend to be attracted to scripts that offer roles to women of color of all or different ages. You know, I'm also very attracted to historical scripts about, you know, famous women or our people, our foremothers, you know, but I also like a really great story. And, you know, but I couldn't say across the board. I could, you know,
Yeah.
I can go a lot of different ways with a script.
I know we've had this discussion, you and I, but I think, you ever see these stories or these plays, the all-black version of? And Imani and I have talked about that a lot. We want to share some of your feelings about that. That's going to be the last one, I promise. Just say it.
I don't have a big problem with those pieces. For example, when I applied for the Drama League, I had to write my concept for a Tennessee Williams play. And I chose The Glass Menagerie, you know, and I had a great concept for that. So if I were given the opportunity to possibly direct that with that concept, I might do that. As far as the people of color side of it is, not every piece becomes a black. What's the deal? You're gonna do The Glass Menagerie, which was written by Tennessee Williams, a Southern white, homosexual man. This is what his disabled, etc. But he's from the South. He writes in the play, the darkies, the darkies. You know, we had the darkies. I mean, they talking about us.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna do a piece and I'm gonna have the character of Amanda, you know, Kim's playing Amanda when she gets to that part, what's she gonna say?
Yeah.
You know, in terms of the darkies, if we're not gonna do a different world where Whitney, you know, did own slaves that came out with Whitney's family in the past. But come on, that's not the main story. So that's where it gets tricky. For
Dicey,
me,
yeah.
if I'm going to really take on a classic piece, let's say, something that has become a classic piece, that I'm gonna do with a black cast, then it needs to lend itself to our past
I
and
see.
our history and
Yeah.
our people.
Yeah.
In such a way that I'm not just saying, okay, you know, I'm just doing the black version of, you know, something that really innately was not about us.
Yeah. Is
And
that,
it's also not true to us, as if someone decides they're gonna do a Raisin in the Sun, and they wanna do it with White Craft Company. We're gonna have a problem with that, because it's not about them, it's about us.
so your feelings are yes or no? Or is just is it just a case by case basis for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just one more thing, and I swear. What about gender? What about gender switching roles? They do that a lot now too.
Okay.
You know, men play traditionally women's roles and women. Yeah, they do that.
Well, they do that. I mean, that's a different, you know, I went to see Once on This Island, and they had a man playing one of the major goddesses.
Really?
That was really female. I didn't even know it was a man, you know?
Uh-huh.
I have a friend, Lavonda, who can do men well.
Uh-huh.
I don't really have a strong position on that either.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Yes.
Yeah, Janet, I was thinking, your passion for producing, would you, or maybe you are, and I just don't kind of aware of it, give, like say, workshops to, say, young actors, on how to produce and how, or if they're not going to produce, how to approach someone to produce them, and, but there's a whole producing world around budgets and how to relate to producers and that whole world of producing. Do you do it, or would you think about doing it?
Well, part of the programming that, you know, we'd like to do with AGM Theater Company is to start lecture series and workshops. And that's something, you know, we're looking to develop more of in 2020. But our major project is Second Look. And that's a project that's going up in October. The run dates are October 18th to November 10th. So right now, a lot of our energies are going towards, are focusing towards the marketing of that particular play. Because
I only bring that up because sometimes I go to these seminars, you know, and I sit in and I listen to them talking, and it's a world that a lot of young people are not privy to, you know, and especially especially in performing arts institutions and stuff like that. They teach certain things, but there's really some grassroots stuff that I think young black people coming up really need to know, you know, in the business, because they're all not going to be in front of the
I
camera.
agree.
Right.
I mean, if I hear one more kid say, I want to be a rapper, I'm like, you know, what about the engineer? What about the guy who edits? What about the guy who directs the videos? Don't you want to think about that? Because that's, a lot of times, that's where a lot of the work comes from.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
a lot of-
especially if you get a reputation for being reliable and good, one after the other.
Exactly.
It's
And a lot
much
of-
easier than hustling trying to be a rapper.
Right.
You know?
And I've been a teaching artist, like, you know, in public schools, and once you get to talk with them and they understand your other positions, they may say something like, well, yeah, I'd like to go to the theater, but I don't want to be on stage. They know they want to be in that world,
Yeah.
but they don't want to be up on stage because they're scared to be in front of an audience, you know. And so if they know there's something else that they can do, and if they know about producing, you know what I mean? that could be something they could, and what, see, the thing is, when I go to these seminars, they're run by, like I say, people of other persuasion, so they are not thinking about this level that we're on the working class people, you know, so they don't know how to teach these young people, you know, the financial end of it.
Sorry. Yes.
Where did you get the title from? What inspired you to have the whole second?
You know, the funniest thing about that is it came early, the name of the play, because a lot of times a writer may not find the name of the project into middle or the end, but for some reason it came quick. And, you know, the synopsis is the story of, you know, a middle-aged African-American woman taking a second look at her past and her present. You know, everything's going cool in her present, but there's something that comes to turn that world around and forces her to take a look at the past. And she has to make a decision about which one is more important to her. Which one is the prize now, the past or the present? So we gave you a little taste of what Second Look is about, and we hope that you come and see us and see it in October.
Any more questions?
I have a question. Do you think it's for both, first for the writer, do you think it's easier to write something that goes to stage or something that goes like directly to Netflix, which seems to be what people are doing now, and for the actor also? Is it easier to get, say, a part in a play, or is it easier to get a part in like a Netflix series?
Two different animals.
Wow.
Two different animals. I mean, like, it's like oranges and strawberries, you know.
Wow.
Very
And
different.
there's more opportunity, there's probably more Netflix
Right.
auditions
Yes.
happening than there are, you know,
Theaters.
plays, so, yeah.
Anybody else? If you can give us a hand.